All right, well, let's go ahead and get started and welcome everybody to today's webinar. I'm going to go ahead and start with kind of a quick introduction of who I am and what we're doing here at Reviewr, and then I'll kind of come back a little bit and talk more about, the goals and the agenda for today's topic and webinar, because I think, setting the stage a little bit about, our background and what we do here at Reviewr and kind of our relationship with many, many of our clients, kind of speaks tones to why we're having this discussion here today. I think it's a very well overdue a webinar topic, really where we kind of look under the hood at the many complexities that go into running a competition, right? Things have changed a lot over the last really 10 to 12 years since I've been doing this, but really in the last kind of 3 to 4 years, as more and more organizations try to implement technologies and online tools, not necessarily to help streamline operations, which absolutely is a core component to things, but really kind of looking at like how technology can elevate the experience, right, for the applicants, the entrepreneurs, the board members, the stakeholders, the investors, and really everybody in between. And that's kind of, I think, a different lens that we need to look at these competitions through is no longer, does the modern applicant and the entrepreneur, want to use built-in spreadsheets and downloadable documents and built-in web forms. They're looking for something a bit more. And I think we as an organization and competition organizers, especially in this space where we're promoting innovation and entrepreneurship, we have to adapt with them. And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of give a quick introduction of who I am and what we do here at Reviewr. And then again, I'm going to kind of come back a little bit more and talk about kind of the goals behind today. So kind of quick introduction. My name is Kyle. I'm the CEO here at Reviewr. Been doing this back since 2012. We have a kind of an interesting story in the sense that we built Reviewr actually initially under a completely different name called PitchBurner, with our own kind of background experience in entrepreneurship focused competition. So everything from like your local, academia or university driven business plan competition to actual investments, right? And our team actually had kind of been split and served two different roles. So number one is as applicants and as entrepreneurs, right, participating and applying to these events, quite frankly, got very frustrated. It was kind of lackluster, a lot of downloading, exporting, a lot of physical binders that we were mailing back in. And it was just an extra kind of burden that we felt was overwhelming for us as entrepreneurs. It was leaving a lot to be desired, right? It was very hard for us to interact with the organizations. It was hard for us to kind of tell our story on paper versus, these interactive tools. And on the flip side of things, as a judge in these types of events, if you think through, if you had 100 applicants, quite frankly, the 3 to 5 or so that are going to end up winning and receiving investments or whatever the purpose behind your competition is, they're already well on their way to success, right? And especially if it's like an academic-based competition for, university students, many times this is pure ideology. They're not really established companies yet. And so how do you provide value to the 95 that don't win, right? And oftentimes it's direct insights or feedback from the judges on kind of why they were selecting people and choosing the way that they did. And that feedback kind of works its way back to the entrepreneurs for some type of self-development and growth where they have an opportunity to apply next year or to another event, or quite frankly, turn that idea into an actual business based off of feedback from the judges. But as I think we can all kind of agree, when these events were being powered by, paper and binders and physical mail, it became impossible to do things like that. And we actually saw firsthand handwritten notes that we had left to entrepreneurs get tossed aside and thrown away because the organizers were so focused on the boots on the ground kind of logistics of the event. And so kind of as things progressed and went online, you start to see more and more institutions leveraging, built-in web forms, downloading of documents, emails, spreadsheets, Google Drive, Zoom links. And while all of these tools in their own sense are quite good and productive, when tied together to power an entrepreneurship competition, it actually created more work for us, right? So now we're dealing with obviously very confidential, sometimes PII. We're dealing with blueprints and innovation that shouldn't be shared. And so we're starting to get really concerned about data security and privacy, how things are being exported, stored, sent off to the judges. From a judging perspective, while we hated the physical binders and nature of it, at least they were centralized. Now we're downloading documents, going to Google Drive, looking at pitch videos, going to business plans, coming back, logging our notes, recompiling it, sending it back to you guys as the competition organizers. And then, quite frankly, I can't even fathom the complexities that you go through where you have to take all of our notes and feedback and recompile it. So this is what led us to build that case PitchBurner, which then turned into Reviewr, as an online platform to run the entire competition lifecycle. I think lifecycle is the key term there from literally start to finish. So the team creation and the company submissions, all the way not even to the judging and selection, but the post selection deliverables, the ongoing feedback from judges, the mentorship, the updating of their investments as they go through the different stages, right? And so with that said, we work with so many organizations who are doing these types of programs, and a lot of the questions that we get asked isn't necessarily from a software perspective. It's more so kind of just best practices around how to structure these types of events using technology and tools in a way that not only creates optimization and streamlined efficiencies for you, right? Because at the end of the day, you're wearing a lot of different hats. And I think typically speaking, playing in spreadsheets and emails isn't the best use of your time. You should be interacting with your investors and your stakeholders and your entrepreneurs. But at the same time, how do we kind of elevate their experience as well? Specifically speaking, we're going to go through one of our clients say it's a new venture competition where they literally have dozens of judges showing up as a volunteer on the weekend to do judging in rooms, right? And so how do we kind of optimize their volunteer hours and get them to come back as repeat judges and provide the experience that the applicants deserve from them? So with all that said, I've had numerous conversations with organizations who are doing competitions, and at the end of the day, I think we're not trying to recreate the wheel here. These are kind of time tested, proven workflows and processes. The challenge that we're running into is that I think at this point in time, as we enter almost 2025, is a lot of these events are still being powered with a wide variety of tools. And so how do we start to take all these moving pieces that you're already doing and then centralize them into one hub? So today I want to do kind of two things. I want to kind of unpack this a bit more, kind of look at a very common competition structure, one that I think is really well ran, and kind of, open the hood and kind of peel back the layers and actually physically look at how it's being powered by a platform like Reviewr, and hopefully that there's some type of, insights or feedback that you can take and apply to your program. So with that said, let's kind of go ahead and jump into today's presentation. I think I'm a very visual person, so obviously we're going to use some type of kind of deck here in the background to help guide the conversation, but I do want to kind of actually showcase Reviewr and show you how these are being powered in real time so you can kind of visualize it for yourself. So, the first thing that we want to look at today is from the front-facing step number one, which is the submission or the entrepreneur experience. And that's kind of a broad topic because it may be the actual team creation. It could be a team leader on behalf of a company. It could be a solo entrepreneur. There's so many different types of competitions and structures. But the goal here is to kind of figure out like what are we trying to collect from the entrepreneurs and from those teams that at the end of the day will give your team the insights that you need for a fair, accurate kind of judging and selection process. And I think one of the challenges that most organizations kind of run into is they maybe over collect information on the front end, which becomes a barrier for those entrepreneurs. Again, I'm trying to speak very broadly because some of these events, you have really well structured companies, right, who are 5 years into their journey. They may have already raised seed funding. Others are pure ideation as part of a classroom activity, right? So I'm trying to speak broadly to the audience here on today's webinar. With that said, though, anytime we look at a competition that's being ran through email, spreadsheets, downloading of documents built in web forms or paper, we are kind of limited to workflows, right? We have to collect all the information because you can't be asking these people to come back to you in the future and submit these additional deliverables because now you have to figure out like what did you already collect, how do you attach it to them, right? And so by using a tool like Reviewr, it does present the opportunity to split the submission process and workflow into multiple stages. So, it's quite possible that on the front end, you don't need full business plans or you don't need video pitches. So think through like, what is it that you need now as you go through a multi-phase competition, as you vet people, as you advance people, can they come back and then submit phase two information, phase three information, et cetera. So the way that I would personally structure my competition is on the front-facing side of things. We need to know who the team is and who the company is. We need to get some type of summary, right, about what their company is. And then at a high level, we're going to get into like, what is the big hairy problem that they're trying to solve? Why is this a big deal, right? Like, why is there a need for their solution? What is their proposed solution? What value is their solution going to provide? And then getting things into like the market size, how they're going to generate revenue, the competitive landscape. And some of those latter things I just mentioned, especially things like traction and validation of their idea, or even like financials, are going to be optional. It just depends on the stage of the companies who are applying to your competition. And then supporting documents and materials, right? So your executive summaries, your pitch decks, your video pitches, your business plans, things like that. And that's kind of where I was getting into is like maybe right away we don't need the full business plan. So maybe it's like, hey, here's my team, here's an executive summary, here's in a tweetable description of what we do and the problem that we're trying to solve. We go through some type of review and vetting process, and then we kind of narrow down that list to phase two. And then phase two, entrepreneurs come in, they do the full blown business plan, they record video pitches, they do their pitch decks, right? They get deeper into like market size and competitive analysis and things like that. So you're putting the bulk of the effort on people who are progressing. It's also an opportunity for you as well to offer feedback. So many of the competitions that we work with, because of a tool like Reviewr, they are able to take in the initial competition application, go through not necessarily a judging phase, but more of like a mentorship feedback stage, send it back virtually to the entrepreneurs, allow them to adapt, make updates to their company, and then almost reapply or make those edits, and then go through judging. I've even seen it as a compelling reason to kind of apply early on because they may say, hey, you have until here and here to submit. But if you submit before this date, you may get feedback from us so you can kind of revise it before the final deadline. So um, ran through that relatively quickly. I think, again, the goal is to actually visualize that, not just me talking through a bunch of bullet points. But just to kind of reiterate, like we're not changing anything. Most of these competitions already are collecting this type of data. I think the topic for today is how do you actually structure in a sense where you lower the barrier for the entrepreneurs, you make it into a multi-phase process, and then we'll kind of get here in the next slide. How do you actually deal with those file uploads and those deliverables? Because that is going to be the bulk of the project. So how do you visualize this in Reviewr? So what I wanted to do is pull an actual example of an organization using Reviewr. So this is the Harvard New Venture competition. I think it's unique in the sense that they are doing multiple different competition tracks. So social innovation, student track, alumni track, business track, etc. A lot of organizations will create competitions with multiple tracks like that. It could be early stage, late stage, whatever it might be. But they're also tying in an actual live pitch portion to it, right? So they're doing exactly what I talked about, where you have initial submissions that come in, they go through a judging process, they narrow it down to finalists. Finalists show up at what they call a Super Saturday event where they're put into different rooms and they're pitching to a series of judges. And so they really are tying in and incorporating both the virtual review and judging process and a live event. There's another organization that we work with that does something similar, but in the sense of they don't do a live pitch. They instead will do it over Zoom. So it's kind of a virtual live program. But all the things that we're going to talk about work the same. So the general goal here is, I think we should leverage your existing websites and your web presence, right? You have a strong institutional brand. You've got content control, so why shouldn't we leverage that? So most organizations will use their sites and they link to Reviewr. Now, most of them will link to a page like this, which is what I call a landing page. It's kind of like your one-stop shop for the entrepreneurs in the team to learn more about the program, dates, deadlines, expectations. But really, it serves as a middleman between your website and then the platform. From here, they create a profile. And so this is really where things get, I think, exciting within Reviewr and kind of set the stage is that, I just mentioned a lot of moving parts. You've got teams and people, you've got their submission, and I say submission probably plural because you might have their initial submission form, and then from one round to the next, additional deliverables or forms being added. You got file uploads, you've got judging and scoring, and ideally there's some type of feedback or mentorship happening as well. And so, again, traditionally speaking, if you're not using a Reviewr, this is happening through a wide variety of different types of tools. Things are going to get lost, things are going to get disconnected, and it creates operational inefficiencies. So the goal is to take an account with Reviewr. It's a profile that the entrepreneur and the team creates. And then long term, it actually holds on to all of those activities that I just mentioned. So literally everything from who they are to their submission forms, et cetera. So let's go ahead and kind of dive deeper into what that would look like. So the team comes in, they create their profile, and then it drops them into the submission form. Again, this is an actual example of a competition being powered by Reviewr. And again, we can kind of sidetrack a little bit and talk about best practices because, again, you may not need to collect all this on the front end. So one of the things that I actually love to see happening, I'm going to make this screen here a bit bigger, is where you actually might start with like an intent to apply. So the team will come in, they're going to put in information about like who the team leader is, what their relationship is to your institution. They may add information about who their other team members are, their company, maybe what school they're applying from, whatever, I guess, record keeping data that you need to capture about them. Some of the competitions that we work with requires like a student to be obviously part of the team, but then they can have students from other institutions as well. It just making sure that like the team captain or somebody is part of your group. So collecting that information. So a lot of our organizations we work with, from a marketing perspective, they launch these programs. They leave an intent to apply open all year, right? So anybody can apply and kind of create their account. And then when the actual competition itself kicks off, the applicants will then log back in and then be presented with phase two, which might look something like this, right? Which is the actual bulk of the submission. So it's a way for you to always be collecting information about, potential applicants, boosting volume, marketing efforts, things like that. So then we kind of get deep into the actual bulk of the submission itself. So again, I think if I was to structure this, I would do a two-phase at least competition where phase one is more text driven. It's, who are you as a company? 250 characters or less. Tell us more about what you guys do. What's the value proposition? If they are looking for funding, obviously, what would that look like? How'd you hear about the competition? Show us your logo. And then it gets into phase two, which is, potentially you can collect at a high level here. So maybe within like 1,000 characters, what's your problem? What's your target market? What's your solution? All the things that I already kind of talked about, how are you going to generate revenue? What's your competitive advantage over your competition? Or you can break this into phase two, right? Where they can kind of come back later on, submit this information. So the entrepreneurs, I think why this is super valuable is it allows them to save, they can log out, they can come back later, it allows, a team, right? A company to collaborate with one another and not, have one person sitting down on a Google sheet, right? And trying to figure this all out themselves. So they can kind of collaborate, they can come back later. It gives you really powerful tracking mechanisms so you can actually see in real time, like how many teams are starting their applications, where are they in the process, are they done, are they not done? If they're not done, you can send them built-in reminder messages, things like that. So again, from these open-ended text fields, again, this is all things that I'll share back out after we talk today, but it's probably things you're currently collecting. It's your very standard pitch deck components, right? Then it drops us into like the file uploads. And this is where, again, this is where a good example of what a multi-phase program could look like, because this isn't by any means a full-blown business plan competition. All they're doing here is submitting a pitch deck. And so once they go through judging and selection, maybe phase two is the full-blown business plan, or maybe phase three is the business plan. Maybe they're going to be submitting, a canvas, or they're going to be doing video pitches, right? All these things that you don't necessarily have to collect here, you can come back later on. I do want to kind of talk though about the file uploads, and that's kind of where we're going to go next. So obviously there's a lot of moving parts and components to this. I think the best way to think about both Reviewr and how we should structure the submission process is less so, hey, this is my competition application, but more so, hey, this is my team or my company's profile. And that profile is going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And it's going to hold on to all of my content, all my team's content, and all my activities. And so if you think through like what are commonly collected file uploads and elements, you have your executive summaries, your pitch decks, your business plans, your logos, financials, cap tables. You even see like product demos or blueprints or whatever that might be. And so this is where you have to really kind of get into, great, just because we can collect that information, what happens next? And traditionally speaking, this is where things get really, really hairy, because you have teams who are constantly making changes up until the deadlines, right, of their pitch decks or of their executive summaries. And so what happens is that they may apply or submit their information to you, and then over the course of 2 weeks, you might get like 6 emails from them saying, hey, here's my updated pitch deck. Hey, here's my updated business plan. And if you got 100 teams, that becomes extremely overwhelming from your perspective. It's also just not a great way to be collecting deliverables. We also have a lot of concerns then around kind of data security and privacy. Again, like it depends on the stage of these companies, but what if you have a company who's pitching who has already raised seed funding, right? And they're about to take their product to market. And now you're dealing with like financial information, cap tables, their pitch deck. That's obviously very, very confidential. How can we ensure that we're not only holding on to it and storing it in a very secure manner, but also you're able to control access levels of who can see it, what they can see, and when they can see it? And so that's, I think, really where the rubber hits the road within Reviewr. The next piece to that as well is I talked about kind of that feedback process. And again, I can go on about, the benefits of providing feedback to the teams who are applying. But you may not just be providing them open-ended feedback on their submission form or on the judging side of things. You might be wanting to leave actual annotations or notes or interactions with these different types of deliverables. So if that is the case, like how can you possibly facilitate that? So again, jumping back into Reviewr. So in this case, the team applies, they create their account, they submit. As they kind of go through that though, they can actually come back into Reviewr and they have their own kind of a hub, right? So this would be their view only access of their submission form. If you wanted them to, they could actually edit and make changes up until deadlines. But from a feedback perspective, you can actually one-to-one communicate with them. So they can kind of log back in and then they can see a series of questions or comments or notes that you're literally leaving to them. It's all done in a very private, secure manner. So they get notified via email, but the content of their feedback isn't in the email. It just says, hey, there's feedback waiting for you. They then come into Reviewr and then they can actually see the secure content right in their portal. They can then take that feedback and make updates, make edits, add new files. They can respond back to you. It's a way for you and them to almost virtually collaborate. But kind of where I want to go with this, right, is operationally speaking, you get these dashboards. And so, I mean, when I mean dashboards, I really mean you get like a full-on command center for competition management. So you can track dates and deadlines, you can track workflows, you can send communication, generate reports. But what you really care about is this. So you have this menu of all of the companies or the teams who are applying to your event, and you can filter and sort by tracks and by categories and phases. But the idea here is that if you open them up, so we're going to open up here Testlux, obviously a fake company, and this is hopefully where that profile concept really starts to resonate. So again, no longer do we have, built-in web forms that we're having to download, export, recompile. No longer are we living in spreadsheets or whatever it might be. You're opening the company's profile, and right off the bat in the center of my page, you can see the entire content that they submitted, right? So problem, solution, there's a link to their website. You have logos, you've got business plans, you got video pitches, you got everything right here on their profile. Better yet, if I jump up here, again, I can leave communication. I can also do internal collaboration. So maybe your judging committees or your team wants to leave notes to one another, but not share it with the company Testlux in this example. They can do that. But you can jump up to the attachment section. And again, it shows you a listing literally of every single file or deliverable that this team ever submitted. Better yet, you can control who can access it, when they can access it. You can make it view only. You can redact it. You can control certain elements. So maybe you want your judges to see the executive summary, but not the financials. You want to release those later on. All that stuff becomes reality. Even better is if I open the files up, so if I press view next to, say, for example, this document, this might be a business plan or a pitch deck, a PowerPoint presentation. They get embedded in Reviewr. So this means that you and your team or your judging committees literally never have to leave the software. They can view the team's submission, they can view the team's attachments, they can leave their communication all in one spot. Even more so, they can actually scroll through and look at this file and leave comments or notes directly in it. So again, it's a really powerful way for your team to kind of review information, leave comments, leave notes, leave feedback, and then make it easily translatable back to the entrepreneurs and to those companies. I also mentioned earlier on, videos and things like that. Video pitches are becoming obviously a very core component to these competitions. And so, again, opening up another example here, obviously this is my son, not applying for a competition yet, but kind of getting his name out there, right? So keep an eye out for his future business. But if I press view, you're going to notice that it actually embeds the video right in Reviewr. So really, really powerful stuff. So going back then to the next piece of the puzzle is great. We've collected all these team submissions. We're giving them feedback. We're giving them insights. They're coming back. They're updating their profiles. They're uploading their documents, their deliverables. The next piece to this puzzle is actually creating some type of review structure, right? So you need at some point in time, take your entrepreneurs and take your companies and then send them off to a team of judges for some type of selection. And I use that term broad because, again, it depends on the structure of your competition. Phase one might be a simple thumbs up, thumbs down. Like, are they a good fit for what we're looking for? Phase two might be more of a robust scorecard. Phase three might be a live pitch. Phase four might even be like a live pitch where you have a fan favorite or public voting as well. And so the idea here is to kind of figure out, what does that structure look like for you? Again, for me, I like to break these competitions into kind of two components. One is categorization of the companies, because I think it's always really valuable to have judges with some type of industry expertise and or judges that don't have expertise in that field that can offer a unique perspective. So it's all about kind of creating this balancing act of what judges should be scoring which entrepreneurs. But again, there's more complexity to this because now we got to figure out how are we actually going to share that information with those judges. And so the next piece of the puzzle to kind of think through, like, what does the workload capacity look like? Some of the data and research that we've done, and it depends on the complexities of the submissions, is most judges on the virtual side of things really don't have the bandwidth to look at more than maybe 15 or so team submissions, right? Between looking at their submission form, reading their business plans, looking at their pitch decks. After 15, there's a pretty deep waterfall effect where they just start to lose focus and energy, and that becomes very unfair to the entrepreneurs, right? The judges are unable to give them the time and energy that they deserve from them, especially if we're asking the judges to leave comments or notes that ultimately will get shared back to the entrepreneur for some type of self-development and feedback. And so the first thing we got to look at is figuring out how do we want to structure the competition, multiple tracks, multiple phases, what are those phases? And then number two is to kind of figure out based on the volume of both applicants and judges that we have, like how many submissions should be assigned to each judge and or how many times do you expect a submission to be scored? Once we have that kind of in place, we have to create structure. And so that's where I'm going to kind of jump back here into Reviewr to kind of walk you through visually what that would look like. So in our system, what ends up happening is you can add in individually or you can upload your entire judges. And you can do this in entirety, right? So you don't have to wait until each phase to do it. You can upload them all on the front end. Once they're in the system, here's where we need to kind of create your judging bucket. So again, I'm a very visual person. That's why I run through the presentation super quick so you can kind of visualize it with me. And so in this example, it's actually a combination of two workflows. You've got four specific categories. You got your energy, clean tech, sustainability category, your technology company category, digital enterprise, and then like consumer products and services. This is actually dummy data. On top of that, you have three phases. You've got the initial screening phase, right, where submissions come in, a dedicated team's going to judge them. They're going to advance the top X number to the semifinals, which again might offer additional deliverables. No longer do we do just executive summaries. That's when the full-blown business plan comes in. You have a brand new scorecard, an entirely new judging committee. They then will go through the review and selection process, and then maybe narrow it down to the top 10, and then those top 10 come and do a live pitch. So the way that the bucketing system works is it's a way for you to either automatically or manually take your companies and place them into a bucket, and then assign that bucket out to a team for judging. So again, to kind of visualize this, I've got a bucket called digital enterprise. So any team or any company applying to the digital enterprise track or to that category will get automatically put into that bucket. The next step is to assign that bucket to a team. So whenever Simon, Paula, and Mark come into Reviewr, they're only going to have access to the companies and whatever bucket you gave them access to. So again, if you've got a dedicated judging panel for phase one, phase two, and phase three, that's beautiful. You just kind of divvy them out to whatever buckets correspond. Obviously, if you have judges who are partaking in multiple phases, that's also great. You just give them access to multiple buckets. So it's a really clean way for you to not only structure and kind of create your entire review process and workflow, but it's also allowing you to access and control who is going to be able to see what teams and when, and really what content they're going to see. Even better, however, is if your competition is a multi-phase program and you care less so about like trying to pair up certain judges with companies based off of their background and their expertise, you can open the buckets up and it actually shows you what's going on. So this is how I would actually structure most judging processes, just because again, I want to make sure that we don't overwhelm our judges. I want to make sure that we can give them the bandwidth that they can offer insights and feedback and conduct a review for the entrepreneurs. So this will show you a list within that bucket of all the teams. So here we have, 6 different teams who are in that bucket. It shows us currently how many judges are assigned to each of those teams and then who those individual judges are. So what's really great about this is I can do some bulk automated assignments. So I could say, you know what, I want to make sure that every team gets looked at exactly 3 times, no more, no less. Or I could say, you know what, I want to make sure that my judges aren't going to be scoring more than 6 teams, but no less than 4. And then as soon as you type those parameters into the system, we equally and randomly assign out judges to submissions to make it match. Now, if you have a conflict of interest or if a judge drops out, which is always going to happen, you can actually override this. So I can click on Mark here. Mark is one of my judges, and it's going to show me currently Mark is supposed to be reviewing Snapplebee's, Teslux, Microsloth, and Twizzler. I can actually unselect one of these teams and then reassign somebody else to Mark. So again, looking high level, we're taking these giant buckets and filling them up with 2 things, submissions and judges. And then from there, we can kind of really dial in either leveraging automation or manual control, who's going to be accessing what. So in this example, when Mark logs in, Mark's only going to see 4 teams. Mark's going to see Snapplebee's, Textlox, Microsoft, and Twizzler. Again, this is also used from a progression system. So once the judging process is done, if I kind of go back here a slide a little bit, it'll show you the ability to take all of your top 10, your top 20 within a category, and then advance them to phase 2 review, phase 3 review, et cetera, where again, you have dedicated judging panels and different score sheets for each one of them. So really powerful stuff here. Also from a data security and privacy perspective, we have to make sure we can control, right, who's going to be accessing what. So then the last piece of the puzzle here is actually conducting the judging and scoring process. And I talked about this in kind of a couple different ways because I think number one is structuring an event in a way that it allows your team to kind of deliberate and have a subjective discussion. but at the same time, there has to be an actual scoring rubric or a mathematics selection tool to kind of help give the data to power those discussions. And so this is kind of, I think, the bread and butter of Reviewr is not only do we create a really efficient way for teams to kind of build their submissions and profiles, we give you as an operation team, all the tools that you need to actually facilitate it, but then the actual judging process itself. And so the idea here is to not only assign them submissions to score, but then equip them for success. So the way it's going to work is we have to think through like how we want the judging process to physically work. I think generally speaking, your scorecards have to flow with the form and or what they see. So if you have a phase two judge, right, who's only in charge of reviewing the business plan portion, but you have a phase one submission that has executive summaries and pitch decks, maybe hide those elements from those judges because that's not part of this phase. So you can actually control the experience for the judge depending on what stage they're in. If it's live judging, you don't need them to see the full-blown profile, right? Like you don't need them to read their business plan because they're pitching right in front of you. So maybe you just show them at a high level who the team is, their name, and their executive summary. But the idea here is that it has to flow. So the judging scorecard should align with what they see on their page. So if you're going to have them score on problem, solution, market size, it should go next to each one of those questions. I think number two is overall, I think judges get really bogged down sometimes in point values. And so if we're trying to be sensitive to their time and energy, if you have like a 20-point judging scale, a lot of times they're going to start to question, like, how do I distinguish a 16 versus a 17 or a 17 versus an 18? And I also think a lot of times too, that opens up a can of worms for you as an organization because you don't have a clear delineation of your teams, right? Anytime you have a lot of judging scorecard questions that are really open-ended, you're going to have kind of really tightly grouped candidates, right? So if you're trying to take the top 10 to move them on, you're going to have a bunch of people are within like a tenth of a point of one another. And so I think one of the things I personally love to see is try to elicit a emotional response from the judges. So instead of saying rank on a scale from 1 to 20, how this team is solving this big hairy problem, it's from below average to exemplary. How are they addressing the attainable market? And so they're not, trying to assign point values. What they're doing instead is giving an emotional response. Now, behind the scenes, there absolutely can and should be point values associated with it. So again, by no means is that a requirement. It's just some of the trends that we've started to see. Number two, however, though, is that we have to be able to run these reports and be able to access the results in real time, especially if you have, these judges using tablets or their iPads or their computers at a live pitch event. You can't spend 3 hours trying to tabulate results. You need to be able to track in real time what the judging process looks like, who are the highest rated applicants, and then empower the team to do their deliberations. The last thing I want to note, and I'm going to show you again, all of these things is I think one of the most critical components to Reviewr, which is the identification of judging trends. So anytime you have judging panels or teams where not all of the submissions or the companies are being scored by all of the judges, you inherently have a potential concern. And it's what happens if you have some judges that on average just score higher or lower than other judges, right? So how do you start to identify what that looks like and then normalize it out? So again, let's kind of visualize that in Reviewr. This is really the bread and butter of the system. So we have in our system a built-in judging module. So again, this is being done both virtually and it's being used in a live event. Clearly, if it's virtual, the judges log into the system. They will then see a listing of all the different companies you want them to judge. If it's happening live, that's great. You might have like 6 different pitch rooms that the teams kind of rotate through. Whenever the entrepreneur gets on stage or comes up to pitch, the judge will just grab their name from this list and they'll click on it. Once they click on it, it pulls two things. One is it pulls on the left-hand side of our screen here, the applicant's profile or the team's profile. And then the right-hand side is your score sheet. So again, I mentioned beforehand that you may not want to show the entire score sheet or show the entire submission form to the judges. That's fine. You can actually control what shows up for them. So if this was the virtual aspect side of things, right, and you want the judges to score on their go-to-market strategy or their team or their revenue model, this is where they can kind of side by side scroll through the submission form, answer a series of questions. They can actually input their scores in. Again, if I want to read my note-taking tools, if I want to look at attachments, I can simply click on the attachments. They embed themselves right in Reviewr. Now, why this is powerful, again, is the judges are interacting with the system. They're doing everything in one hub. So if they're judging on a Wednesday night at their home, they can do so. If it's a live pitch event, boom, they just spend their time on the score sheet. But why this works really, really well is traditionally speaking, judges are going to do two things. They're going to leave comments and notes, and then they're going to send it to you. Now, as a competition organizer, you need to take every single judge's comments and scores and then consolidate them with everybody else's, oftentimes done through spreadsheets. That inherently causes a bunch of time and energy that you don't have. B, it opens the door for human error. As much as we think that we're great with spreadsheets, one formula or one row that might be off is going to have, dramatic consequences. And then C is how on earth are you going to take that communication or those comments and that feedback and then give it back to the teams and give it back to the entrepreneurs? So again, in Reviewr, they can input all that stuff into the system, and then you basically get this leaderboard. And you can filter on a per track basis, a per round basis. You can do live versus virtual, and it shows you a running list of literally every single team, who scored them from a judging panel perspective, how they scored individually, how they scored collectively, average scores. And what this is going to do is two things. One is you can actually physically see in real time, are the judges done or not done? Because you might want to send them built-in reminders. It shows you who your highest rated in real time companies are. And then from here, you can do a couple things. I see this used a lot for deliberation. So this page gets pulled up amongst a judging committee, and they might say, hey, here's our top 5 teams. Let's talk about why we scored them the way that we did. Because just because the data says one thing doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to end, right? A certain judge might have a really compelling reason why they scored somebody the way that they did, which may influence the rankings. That's totally fine. Again, at the end of the day, the goal is to leverage the data to make empowered, informed decisions. So what you and your teams can actually do is not only use this for deliberation, but you can actually bulk select the different teams. And at the bottom, you can move them from one phase to the next. So again, thinking big picture, you might have phase 1 here, which is a simple high-level vetting process. It's a rudimentary scorecard. It's an internal staff that goes through judging. You then take your top, I'm gonna make up a number, top 50, and then move them to the semifinals. Those teams come back into Reviewr. They then submit additional deliverables that are only necessary by these semifinals teams. They resubmit. It then goes through another judging process using a completely different score sheet with a completely different judging team. You then will take your top 10 from here, or top 20, and then physically move them to the live pitch. And then again, when the teams are pitching in person, this is now happening in the back end where you and your team can kind of track as the teams pitch what the judging scoring results look like as they come in. So again, a ton of automation and a ton of efficiency. Again, going back to it, if I left feedback to Teslux, they could actually come back into Reviewr, and maybe you want to be completely transparent and show them the score sheets that were filled out. They could actually physically view how each individual judge scored them on a per question basis, the comments, etc. Or maybe you don't want to show that. You want to just give them one overarching comment box. So you have a lot of control over that. But the next thing I want to look at, and this is the final piece that we're going to talk about today, is if you kind of look down here, I got Mark here that gave this applicant a score of a 12. And so this submission was very close between second and third place. And so my question then comes, did Mark just score this applicant really, really low because they didn't think they were a very good team? Or what if Mark has never given like higher than a 14? So yes, in comparative to other judges, Mark did score low, but for Mark himself, he actually scored that team really, really well. So how do you not penalize that team just by getting a quote unquote hard ass judge? Or on the other side of things, what if they got a judge that just gives out 30s left and right? And so within Reviewr, we actually have a really powerful report that I'm going to show you that allows you to kind of identify that and then make decisions. So it looks something like this. And so as you can see here, I have a listing of all of my teams or all of my entrepreneurs that pitched, and I can track on a per question basis how the judges scored them. So what you really care about is this green section. And what this is doing is it's showing you for every single judge, like what their individual averages are. So this is real data that's been redacted from a real competition. And you can see here that Judge Judy on average scores about 24. Tony, however, on average scores a 34. So what happens if you don't have, if you have an entrepreneur that got judged by Judge Judy that didn't get scored by Tony? Inherently, that entrepreneur, that team got scored probably 10 points lower than another team that was scored by a completely different judge. That is critical in the early phases of the competition as you're kind of trying to narrow people down. It's also critical too, is if you have, these judging rooms, how do you start to identify rooms of judges that just on average are more strict than others? And so because we know this, we can do a couple things. So we actually in this report change the results. So if you were scored a 23.875, that's now a 1 because that means you were scored exactly average by that judge. We can then take every single judge's averages and compare them against one another. So your final results might look something like this. I have Elon here who scored, say for example, a 0.82, which means that he was scored on average almost 2/10 of a point lower than all of the judges' averages. Whereas, Michael Scott there was scored almost a 1.1, so a full 1.1 times higher than average. So it's a way for you to kind of normalize the results. We have many, many clients that use this as their leaderboards. They just run this report, and this is how they sort and rank their applicants or their teams from high to low. Others will use this in conjunction with that last page that I showed you, which is your leaderboards, to kind of empower an informed deliberation meeting or a discussion amongst your judges. So, again, really powerful stuff happening here. The goal behind Reviewr, as we kind of wrap things up, is kind of one last final thought for you, is a lot of competitions are being ran in a very similar fashion. Again, and there's no need to recreate the wheel. It's the same kind of thought process that goes into a venture capital firm or an angel investor who's making investments into a company. They have to look at the team, they have to look at the company, they have to look at, what problem they're trying to solve, what is the addressable market size, and how good is their solution. And then it's on them to figure out, is this worth investing into? And if you give them 100 companies to invest into, how do they allocate their funds? That's really at its core what we're trying to do here. So the data collection itself doesn't need to change, right? You already kind of have your process in place. The challenge that we're solving here at Reviewr is the really overly complex nature of how you collect that information. It's 2000 and almost 2025. Like the expectation from these teams and from these entrepreneurs is not fillable PDFs. It's not physically mailing things into you. It's not sending you a bunch of emails with attachments. They want to create these team profiles. They want these highly interactive experiences. They want to load it up with content and deliverables. They want to feel safe that when they submit to you their financials or their pitch decks, that it's going to be seen by the right people, not being downloaded and stored on some random computer. That's the desirable experience from the applicants. Operationally speaking, I have no doubt that we can all kind of roll up our sleeves and power through efficiencies. With that said, there are a lot of moving parts in your daily lives. How do we kind of allow you to focus on high payoff activities and less so downloading documents and emailing, and empower you more to provide feedback to the entrepreneurs and coach them up and do what you do really, really well? And then equally, if not most important, is the judging experience. These programs cannot happen and they will not happen without teams of judges, right? And so if we're asking them to allocate time and volunteer their time, how do we equip them for success with an infrastructure that they can stay highly focused? They're not going to spend 3 or 4 evenings. They're going to do it in 3 hours. But also at the same time, allocating the energy that the applicants and the entrepreneurs deserved from them. So, if you had to think through like what a competition looks like, there might be 12 to 14 moving pieces. All we're doing here at Reviewr is taking all 12 to 14 of them and consolidating them into a dedicated platform built specifically for the task at hand. So with that said, I really appreciate everybody's time today. At Reviewr, there's kind of two different, angles that you may be going down. You might be, in the market for a tool right now, or you're just kind of an exploratory phase. So whatever I can do to be of service to you. I've been doing this now for 12 years. I've seen hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands at this point of competitions. I've judged in them. I've done on-site with Reviewr for many of our clients. I've seen at this point in time virtually everything. So if you want to kind of dive deeper into what your process and workflows look like and kind of gather best practices or trends, I'm open to it. If you want to kind of look at how there's, components or features in Reviewr that might serve you, I'm open to it. Whatever I can do for you. Again, we built Reviewr, named it Reviewr for a reason, right? We are part of the judging review committee. So we built it initially for ourselves to make our lives easier. And then over time, it became a platform built by the people, for people like yourself. So with all that said, really appreciate your time and participation. If there's anything I can ever do for you, please do let me know.